Good Monday morning, English 108 Online. I hope you guys are doing well. It's been a while. A couple of quick things here. This isn't going to be a tremendously long video, but it is an important one in that it's going to give you some final insight into the instructions assignment, and then it's going to get us started on our next assignment, which is the safety fact sheet. I would say about 50% of you are really doing a nice job with the instructions and have taken to heart the idea that they should be an optimal set of directions or instructions for a task and not just a functional set of directions or instructions for a task, and I'll elaborate on that in a second. And then 50% of you just have not demonstrated the amount of effort or critical thinking that's necessary to really succeed on this assignment. So let me tell you this, if you have just a simple list of instructions without formatting, and it's just a linear set of instructions, just using words, not using any formatting strategies, and certainly not using any images, you are fundamentally doing this assignment wrong, and you need to really reconsider your approach. And I'll be giving you feedback on this, but there's only so much feedback I can give you. I think at a certain point it comes down to the level of effort and the amount of time that you're spending on this assignment. So remember, it's not difficult, and anybody can do it to get a user from point A to point B. Our focus in this assignment is to create optimal instructions. And to do that, you have to think critically about the three core moves of any instructional document. You have to set the stage, and you have to do that optimally. You have to give them the most specific set of conditions under which they will succeed. You have to coach the reader, which is more than just directing the reader. It means assuming the role of coach, imparting wisdom. It means trying to make this task as consistent and as predictable as possible. And it's about alerting, which means providing timely and conspicuous notations that signal to the reader that they are about to do something that is critical and or dangerous. Okay, so I just really need you to spend some time working on and revising these instructions. It is a significant assignment in this class, and there are a lot of learning outcomes in this particular assignment. I need to know that you can understand the importance of formatting in a document. I need to know that you can understand how to break process up into its component parts and really focus on providing the most granular or bite-sized little pieces that you possibly can. I need to know that you have skill at supplementing the text with images or visual cues. And so those are things that I really need to see evidence of. So, and again, I'll be providing feedback on those documents as soon as possible. And like I said, about 50% of you are really cooking with gas. The other thing that I think is really encouraging is that folks seem to take the usability test assignment very seriously, and that's great because that's the only way I know for sure to improve a set of instructions is to actually draft them out, give it your best shot, and then put them in front of a user and watch the user, because that will give you the best data in terms of how to approach your revisions, because you're going to see even if the user doesn't make mistakes, you're going to see looks of consternation, you're going to see a lack of fluidity in the process, you're going to see them perhaps hesitating, you're going to see them calculating in their head or trying to make decisions, and those are moments when as a writer you can observe that and use that as fodder for revisions. It may just be making something a little bit more clear, maybe taking the guesswork out of something, but certainly this is not it's not uncommon for people to have left out steps, to have not provided specific enough information or data for the person to make the next move. Certainly indicators of success where the reader is trying to evaluate whether or not it's safe for them to move on to the next step. Those are things that we can include. So the usability test is really important, and honestly, if there's one thing that you remember, well, there's two things that I hope you remember from this unit 5 years from now, and that is staging, coaching, and alerting. If you can remember those three major buckets of information that any good instructional document has, you'll be in a good spot. And then if you remember just to run a quick usability test with your instructions, those two things alone will make your instructional documents better than most people's. So those are really the key things that I want you to focus on here in week number 11, is spending some time working on your instructions and using my feedback, because I do take this assignment very seriously, and I will not tolerate instructions that do not coach, stage, and alert the reader, okay, and do it at a high level. Again, you need to set the bar high for yourself. We're dealing with relatively mundane, simple, innocent tasks, things like recipes and things like that aren't high stakes. But if we extrapolate this assignment and we put it into an industrial or commercial environment, we're dealing with valuable time. People's time is incredibly valuable. So if you can reduce the time it takes for somebody to complete a task by 10, 15, 20, 25%, I mean that's affecting your bottom line. We're dealing with expensive materials, so if we can eliminate waste, I mean that's incredibly valuable. If we can eliminate hazards or potential problems, again, these things speak to the bottom line of any company or business, and ultimately they lead to a more consistent, more predictable, and safer result, and that's what we're really after. So if you're not practicing it here when you go to do this in an environment where you're dealing with, say, something like copper wire, which is incredibly valuable, you're not going to be prepared to write instructions that are the most efficient, that eliminate waste, that show the reader how to do something in the most efficient and economical way possible. So that's really where I need you to set the bar, and it really is just about setting the bar. So I need you to sit down and really think about how can I make these instructions as user-friendly as possible, and how can I create optimal outcomes. So if you do that, you're going to be in a good spot on this assignment. And then, so once we finish this assignment, which will kind of take place this week, we're really going to start to turn our focus to the safety fact sheet. And this assignment it comes from a real scenario, a real environment. A few years ago, I had the privilege of working with Central Maine Power and some of their employees on their technical and professional writing within the workplace. And one of the things that they were routinely asked to write were these safety briefs. And effectively what they were handouts that were given to their employees. In my case, I was working with folks who oversaw a group of linemen, and they're these little handouts that just provide really practical, pragmatic information about a health or safety related issue that those particular line workers would be confronted with out in the field. Okay, and it's really a preventative document. It's giving your reader enough information so that they understand the significance of the issue, the ins and outs of the issue, so to speak, and then certainly how to prevent the issue. So let me give you an example. One of the issues that seems to plague line workers a lot are rotator cuff issues. Okay, and the rotator cuff is kind of like part of your shoulder, and line workers are particularly susceptible to this type of injury because they're oftentimes in sort of an awkward position, dealing with heavy things, pulling and wrenching on things, and so they put a lot of stress on that particular part of the body. And so while I was there, they were trying to produce a handout that would educate their line workers about the rotator cuff and how to prevent issues in the field. So what this is not an encyclopedia entry about a particular issue, okay? This is a context-specific, very practical document written for a very particular audience of coworkers. Okay, so it's not a general article or handout about carpal tunnel. It's about how carpal tunnel manifests itself in the electrical field. So what types of actions, what types of tools, what types of repetitive motions cause carpal tunnel in the electrical field, and then certainly how can electricians overcome that, prevent that. And so that's really what we're after, okay? And so what this is going to challenge you to do is a number of things. I'm limiting you in some pretty important ways. One, you only have one sheet of paper on which to deliver this message. Two, it has to be something that can be really easy to read. Three, it has to be written to a very specific audience. It has to be written to your coworkers, not everybody's coworkers. So you have to really think about how that health or safety related issue intersects with that particular population's life, and then you have to provide very specific preventative measures that reader can take to avoid these things. Okay, and anything's on the table. So each of your fields has its own unique health or safety related issues. So if you're a welder, certainly there are a number of health or safety related things that you're confronted with on a day-to-day basis. And so your job is to talk about one of those, to share with the reader what it looks like, why it's an important topic to concern yourself with, and then certainly how to prevent the issue. So if we're talking about noxious fumes, what are the noxious fumes, what do they do to the body, and then certainly how do we prevent inhaling or intaking those noxious fumes. It could be things to do with vision. So it could be, lifting, anything is on the table, slips, trips, and falls. If you're in culinary, it could be cross-contamination. It could be the importance of maintaining proper temperatures. So really anything that has anything to do with a health or safety related issue is on the table for us. If you're in the IT field, it could be proper ergonomics. It could be carpal tunnel. It could be visual strain from staring at a screen. It could be from sitting too much. So we're really just trying to identify an issue that's commonplace in your field, and we're trying to provide a one-page, really succinct, really easy to read handout that gives the reader what they need to know in terms of what the issue is, why it matters, and how to prevent it. Okay? So in so doing, I don't want just your opinion or just your experience. Here's what you know about noxious fumes or carpal tunnel or rotator cuffs or neck strain or back strain or knee injuries. You're going to have to do some degree of research, okay? And so I understand that this is a vocationally oriented class. I'm really trying to prepare you for the writing that you're going to do in the workplace. And so we're not going to go off the deep end here and look in scholarly journal articles and those types of things. That's not really practical or really that useful for you. What we are going to do, though, is we're going to try to find high-quality information. So some of the lessons this week are about, what makes high-quality information? How can I limit my larger search so that I'm not just getting stuff from Uncle Merle on Yahoo Answers, and I'm actually getting stuff that's valuable, validated, practical, current. How can I get the highest quality information possible? So I'm going to give you some tips and tricks on how to do that. And ultimately, what we're going to end up with is a really well-researched, really well-presented sheet that could update any coworker on the best practices for dealing with a particular health or safety issue. Okay? And so in so doing, you're probably going to practice and learn a lot of different skills. You're going to learn how to allocate the space of an individual page, what I call the real estate, proportionate to the value to a reader. We're going to think really carefully about what information we want to present to the reader and what information we don't want to present. I can tell you from experience and from reading hundreds of these that the number one mistake folks make on this assignment is that they simply present too much extraneous or unnecessary information that at the end of the day doesn't help a coworker or an employee make a better decision. Okay? This is not an encyclopedia entry. You do not need to teach unless it's very practical or pragmatic to do so, you do not need to teach your coworker about the anatomy and physiology of carpal tunnel as it relates to the anatomical structures of the wrist. That's not what we're doing here. What we're trying to do is write at such a level that we are providing the most useful and practical and helpful information we can to our particular reader, and that's what writing is. And I've said this before in some of my mini lectures, but writing at its most fundamental is just a series of decisions that we make, okay, about what word to use, how much information to provide. So we're just constantly calibrating those decisions against our purpose and our audience. Our audience here is not medical professionals. It is not scientists. Your audience here are your coworkers. So using that as a guiding light, as a calibration point, that should help you choose the language that you're going to use. So we're not going to use a bunch of medical jargon. It should help you think about the level of detail that you have to provide, and it should help you think about how you're going to frame certain information. And again, prevention here is the key. Okay? We're providing this knowledge in the spirit of preventing these types of injuries or problems. And so this is a very practical document, and I want you to keep that in mind. When people do not do well on this assignment, it's because they turn it into an encyclopedia entry. It's because they fall victim to the copy and paste model of writing, where they go to WebMD, they find an article about carpal tunnel that's written for the widest possible audience and starts with the most fundamental information, and they just copy and paste it, and they're not, again, calibrating it against their audience and their purpose. Our audience is our coworkers who have a very specific worldview when they're at work. They have a very specific set of tasks that they're doing, and so they want very practical information for where am I going to run into this issue and how can I prevent this issue. And then our purpose is prevention. Okay, knowledge equals prevention. So we're informing the reader to the extent that it helps them prevent the issue. Okay, we're not trying to turn them into resident experts on the rotator cuff and the typical injuries of the rotator cuff and all of the various surgical interventions that can happen to solve these issues. That's not what we're doing here, okay? We're just trying to update our coworkers to the extent that it helps them do their work more in a safer way and in a way that prevents that particular issue. So I just want you to keep that in the back of your mind, and we're going to work through this over the next couple of weeks, and ultimately what you're going to produce is a really easy to read handout that you could hand to your coworkers and that they would actually read it, okay? This is not an essay, this is not a research paper, this is a handout, this is a fact sheet. And so this week we're going to start to try to think about what is a fact sheet, what does it look like, what are its parts and pieces, okay? Because at the end of the day, if we hand somebody a research paper or an essay or something that's big blocks of text, they're not likely to read it. But if we can break this down into bulleted lists or sequences, or we can include a table or a chart or a diagram, and we can provide these little snippets of information that are very practically oriented, very plainly and simply written, then we have a really good chance that our readers are actually going to uptake that information, change their behavior, and ultimately lead to a safer workplace. So it's kind of a challenging assignment in that there are a number of different things we have to kind of juggle. We have to juggle document design, we have to juggle the editorial decision-making that it takes to decide what we're going to include, what we're not going to include. It includes a research component, so finding high-quality information. And so there's a lot that we have to think about. But at the end of the day, all I care about is that you produce a document that helps your reader do their specific work more safely. And if we do that, then we are cooking with gas, and we'll have just one assignment left. We're really getting there. I can't stress enough how much I appreciate how steady everybody in the class has been with their work. I haven't had to chase people down for their homework assignments and things like that. And so you're taking those assignments seriously, which I think ultimately is going to help you, because each of those assignments really scaffolds you or builds you into the larger assignments. So I really appreciate that. As always, if you need any help or assistance, you feel uncomfortable with your instructions, that you know they need to be better, but you're not sure exactly how to implement some of the things that you'd like to implement, I'm always around. I can chat with you by the phone. We can text, I can meet with you in person, we can Skype, whatever makes the most sense for you, but you have to use me as a resource, and I'm happy to be that resource for you. So I lied, we're 16 and a half minutes in, and I'm just wrapping up. So it was relatively long, but I hope that you find it helpful. It's foundational stuff. At the end of the day, this class is really about preparing you to go into the workplace and produce writing that is useful to your readers and your coworkers, and that actually inspires the types of change that you want to see, that it makes procedures more efficient, more predictable, more reliable, that it makes your coworkers safer, happier, and ultimately more healthy. And so I think the lessons that are baked into these various assignments are really valuable to making you a more productive employee, and ultimately making you more attractive to climb up the ladder, so to speak. One of the things that we know is that folks who are judged as being in the top tier of writers within their field make an extraordinary amount of money more than their coworkers. It's an inordinate amount of money that's placed on the value of communication. So it's really important for me that you're taking this seriously. So as I said, I'm here to help, and hit me up if you need anything. Take care.